Commander Arin's ship screamed through the toxic clouds of Keth 7, alarms blaring as her hull cracked under the pressure. The crystalline being inside fought desperately with her controls, but nothing responded. Her transparent body flickered, with pain as the sulfuric atmosphere began eating through her ship's failing shields. The crash was violent. Metal twisted and sparked as her vessel carved a deep trench across the barren landscape. Arin crawled from the wreckage, her silicon-based form already showing dark spots where the poisonous air touched her skin. Each breath burned like fire in her crystalline lungs. She had maybe 6 hours before her body would completely dissolve. With shaking hands, she activated her emergency beacon and began broadcasting on every frequency she could reach. Her voice crackled across the void of space, desperate and raw with pain. "This is Commander Arin of the Crystalline Hegemony," she gasped into her transmitter. "My ship has crashed on Keith 7. The atmosphere is killing me. I need help." She paused, fighting. Another wave of agony, as more of her crystalline structure began to cloud and crack. The sulfuric storms outside howled like demons, and she could see the acid rain starting to eat through her ship's remaining hull. "Listen carefully," she continued, her voice growing weaker. "There's only one thing that can save me now. At the core of this planet, beneath all the lava and molten rock, there's a rare isotope called Helix 9. It's the only substance that can neutralize the poison in my system." Arin looked at her scanner readings, and her heart sank. The isotope was buried, deep in the planet's molten center, protected by layers of boiling lava, crushing pressure and deadly radiation. No ship she knew of could survive such a journey. "I know what I'm asking," she whispered into the transmitter. "It's a suicide mission. The acid storms alone will destroy most ships before they even reach the surface. Then there's the lava tubes, the toxic gases, the crushing heat. Anyone who tries to help me will probably die." She slumped against her ship's wall, feeling her strength fading fast. Through her helmet's visor, she could see her own reflection growing dimmer as her crystalline body continued to deteriorate. The poison was spreading faster now. But if someone out there is listening, if someone is brave enough or crazy enough to try, the isotope readings are on frequency 7.4. You'll need heat shields rated for at least 3,000 degrees, and your ship will need to dive straight down through the planet's crust. A violent coughing fit shook her frame, and she tasted something bitter and metallic. Time was running out faster than she'd hoped. "I'm uploading my ship's sensor data now," she managed between labored breaths. "It shows the safest route through, the storms and the exact location of the Helix 9 deposits. But safe is relative here. This whole moon wants to kill anything that lands on it." The wind outside grew stronger, and she could hear her ship groaning under the assault of the acid rain. Soon even this small shelter would be gone. "My name is Arin," she said quietly, almost like a prayer. "I'm 43 cycles old. I have 2 younglings waiting for me back home. They think their mother is coming back from this mission." She closed her eyes, gathering what little strength remained. "If anyone receives this message, know that I understand what I'm asking. No one should die for a stranger. But if you're out there, if you're listening, and if you have even the smallest chance of making it to that core and back alive, please try. Please don't let my children grow up without their mother." The transmission ended with a soft click, and Commander Arin settled back to wait, hoping against hope that somewhere in the vast dark Najiho stared at Hana in complete shock, his hands trembling as he reached toward her face. She felt real, warm, alive. But that was impossible. He had watched her die 2 years ago, had held her broken body in his arms as the Vorin energy weapons tore through the diplomatic station. "You're not real," he whispered, stepping backward. "This is some kind of trick, some Vorin mind game." Hana's eyes filled with tears, the same warm brown eyes he remembered. "I know how this looks, Jiho. I know what you saw that day. But please, just listen to me." She moved closer, her footsteps making real sounds on the metal floor of the memorial chamber. "When the Vorin attacked our station, I wasn't killed, not in the way we understand death. They did something to me, something they call transcendence." Jiho's mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing and hearing. "Transcendence? What does that even mean?" "They took my consciousness, my entire mind, and uploaded it into their neural network," Hana explained, her voice steady but filled with emotion. For them, it's the greatest honor they can give to another being. They believe physical death is a tragedy, so they preserve minds in their collective digital existence. She paused, watching Jiho's face carefully. The Vorin have done this to thousands of species across the galaxy over millions of years. Every advanced civilization they encounter, they offer this gift of immortality. But you're here, Jiho said, still struggling to believe. You're standing right in front of me. Hana nodded slowly. That's where things get complicated. When they transcended me, something went wrong. Or maybe something went right, depending on how you look at it. She began pacing, her movements exactly like he remembered. Every other species they've transcended has dissolved completely into their collective consciousness. The individual mind disappears, becomes part of their shared existence. That's what's supposed to happen. Jiho found himself leaning forward, despite his disbelief. But it didn't happen to you. No, it didn't, Hana said with a slight smile. My human mind refused to merge completely. I kept my memories, my personality, my individual thoughts. The Vorin were shocked. In their entire history, no consciousness had ever resisted integration like this. So you've been trapped in their network for 2 years? Not trapped exactly, Hana corrected. I learned to navigate their digital realm. I could access their memories, their knowledge, even communicate with other transcended beings. But I remained myself completely and stubbornly human. She stopped pacing and looked directly at him. The Voren don't know what to make of me. Some of them are fascinated by human consciousness. They've never encountered a mind that could exist in their network while maintaining its independence. And the others? Hana's expression darkened. The others are terrified. They see me as a contamination, a threat to their perfect unity. My human thoughts, my individual desires, they're spreading through their network like a virus. Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean, spreading? Other transcended beings, ones who merged completely years or centuries ago, they're starting to remember their individual selves when they come near my consciousness. The Vorin collective is experiencing something they've never felt before. Doubt, curiosity, the desire for personal identity. She reached out and touched his arm, her hand solid and real. They gave me this physical form as an experiment to study how human consciousness works. But they're divided on what to do with me. Some want to study me further, others want to destroy me completely. And what do you want? Jiho asked quietly. Hana looked out at the stars, visible through the memorial chamber's viewport. I want to go home. Hana sat down beside Jiho on the memorial chamber's bench, her presence both comforting and terrifying. The weight of what she was about to reveal pressed heavily on her shoulders. During my time in their network, I discovered something that changes everything, she began, her voice low and urgent. The Vorin have been watching humanity for decades, studying us, trying to understand why we're different from every other. A species they've encountered. Jiho turned to face her fully. Different how? Every civilization they've transcended before us had one thing in common, Hana explained. When faced with the choice between individual death and collective immortality, they eventually chose the collective. Even the most stubborn species eventually saw the logic in abandoning personal identity for eternal existence. She paused, remembering the vast digital libraries she had explored within the Vorin network. But humans, we're something they've never seen before. We value our individual selves so much that we'd rather die than lose who we are. And that scares them, terrifies them, Hana confirmed, but it also fascinates them. They've decided that humanity represents the next step in evolution, a species capable of true immortality, while maintaining individual consciousness. Jiho felt his blood run cold. What are you saying? They're planning to transcend all of humanity, Hana said quietly. Not just a few diplomats or scientists, but everyone. Every man, woman, and child on Earth and all the colonies. They believe they're saving us from the tragedy of death. The implications hit Jiho like a physical blow. But if human consciousness doesn't integrate properly... Exactly, Hana nodded grimly. They know we'll create chaos in their network, but they think they can contain it. They believe that given enough time, Even human minds will eventually accept collective existence. She stood up and walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. But they're wrong about something important. My presence in their network isn't just preserving my own identity. It's awakening something in the other transcended beings. What do you mean? Hana turned back to him, her eyes bright with a mixture of hope and concern. The Vorin collective has existed for millions of years as a perfect unity. No individual thoughts, no personal desires, no conflicts. But when transcended beings interact with my consciousness, something incredible happens. She began pacing again, energy building in her voice. They start remembering who they used to be. Her being that was once a proud warrior from the Altair system suddenly recalls the thrill of individual combat. A former artist from the Vega colonies begins to crave the satisfaction of creating something uniquely their own. Jiho leaned forward, intrigued despite the danger. The collective is breaking down? Not breaking down exactly, but changing, Hana corrected. For the first time in their history, some Vorin are experiencing what we would call curiosity about individual existence. They're asking questions they've never asked before. What would it feel like to make a choice based on personal desire, rather than collective logic? She sat back down, her expression serious. There's a group forming within their network, beings who are starting to value individual thought over perfect unity. They don't have a name for themselves yet, but they're growing stronger every day. Are they helping you? Some are, Hana admitted, but others are fighting back hard. The traditional Vorin see these awakening individuals as a disease that needs to be cured. There's actually a war happening right now in their digital realm, a conflict between those who want to preserve the old collective and those who are embracing individual consciousness. Jiho ran his hands through his hair, overwhelmed. And meanwhile, they're planning to transcend all of humanity. The timeline has accelerated because of the civil war in their network, Hana revealed. The traditional Vorin want to transcend humanity quickly, before more of their collective becomes contaminated with individual thoughts. They believe that once they have billions of human minds in their system, they can use our consciousness to either strengthen their unity or study us closely enough to find a way to make us integrate properly. So we're either going to destroy their collective from the inside, or they're going to find a way to destroy what makes us human. Hana nodded, solemnly. That's exactly right, but there's something else, something that might give us an advantage they don't expect. What? The awakening Voran, the ones who are rediscovering individual identity. They're not just curious about being individuals again. They're starting to understand why humans fight so hard to remain ourselves. And some of them are beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, we're worth fighting for. Hana closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her physical form began to shimmer and fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. Watch this, she said to Jiho, her voice now sounding like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Before his amazed eyes, Hana's body completely disappeared. The memorial chamber felt empty and cold for a moment. Then, gradually, she began to reappear solid and real once more. How did you do that? Jiho gasped, reaching out to touch her arm to make sure she was truly there. I can exist in both worlds now, Hana explained, flexing her fingers as if testing her own reality. Physical form when I need to interact with the material universe. Digital form when I need to access the Vorin network. It took me months to learn how to control it. She sat down heavily, the effort of transformation clearly draining. But I'm not the only one, Jiho. There are others. Other humans? 17 of them scattered across the galaxy, Hana confirmed. Humans who were transcended over the past 50 years during various first contact missions. The Vorin kept their existence secret, studying them, trying to understand why we resist integration. Jiho felt a surge of anger. 50 years? They've been taking our people for 50 years. The early ones almost broke, Hana continued sadly. Spending decades alone in a collective consciousness that rejected their individuality. But they held on somehow. They kept their human identity alive by clinging to memories of home, of family, of what it meant to be themselves. She stood up and began pacing, her energy returning. When I arrived in the network 2 years ago, everything changed. My presence, Gave them hope, showed them they weren't alone. We started finding each other, communicating in secret, sharing our human experiences. What are you planning? We're not just surviving anymore, Hannah said with determination. We're fighting back. Every day we spread a little more human consciousness through their network. We show other transcended beings what it feels like to have personal thoughts, individual dreams. Jiho could see the fire in her eyes, the same fierce independence that had made him fall in love with her years ago. And it's working? Better than we ever hoped, Hannah smiled. There's a Vorin entity that calls itself Nyx. It was transcended from some ancient civilization millions of years ago, but contact with our human group awakened its original personality. She moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Nyx remembers being an individual before joining the collective. It remembers having personal desires, making choices based on emotion rather than pure logic, and now it wants that feeling back. One Vorin against an entire collective doesn't sound like much help. Nyx isn't alone anymore, Hannah revealed. He has been secretly awakening others, showing them memories of individual existence. They call themselves the Touched, beings who have been influenced by human consciousness. Jiho joined her at the viewport. How many? Thousands now, and growing every day. They're forming their own faction within the network, questioning everything the collective has believed for millions of years. They're asking dangerous questions, like what if individual consciousness isn't a disease to be cured but a gift to be preserved? That must be causing problems. Hannah laughed, but there was no humor in it. The traditional Vorin are panicking. They've never faced internal dissent before. For the first time in their history, they're experiencing what we would call a civil war. She turned to face him directly. But here's the most important part, Jiho. Nyx and the Touched aren't just fighting for their own individuality. They're fighting for humanity's right to remain human. What do you mean? Nyx has access to the collective's deepest plans, Hannah explained. It knows about the timeline for transcending all of humanity, but it's also been sabotaging those plans from the inside, delaying preparations, misdirecting resources. Jiho felt a flicker of hope. So we have allies. More than allies, Hannah said firmly. We have Vorin, who are willing to risk everything to protect human consciousness. Nyx has even started teaching other Touched how to value the very qualities that make humans unique. Our stubbornness, our emotional decisions, our refusal to surrender our individual selves. But can they really stop the transcendence of all humanity? Hannah's expression grew serious. Not alone. The traditional Vorin still control most of the collective's resources and military power. But Nyx has a plan, something that could change everything. It involves the other transcended humans, our ability to exist in both forms, and a secret about the Vorin network that even they don't fully understand. What secret? That's what I need to show you, Hannah said, her form beginning to shimmer again. But I can't explain it in words. You'll have to trust me and let me take you into the network itself. Are you ready to see what human consciousness can really do when it refuses to give up? Jiho stood at the command center of New Terra Station, surrounded by holographic displays showing every human colony across the galaxy. The room buzzed with urgent activity as communication officers worked frantically to establish secure channels with distant worlds. This is insane, muttered Admiral Kwan, studying the intelligence reports Hannah had provided. You're telling me the Vorin have been secretly abducting our people for 50 years, and now they want to transcend our entire species? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Jiho replied firmly. And we have maybe 6 months before they make their move. The holographic map displayed 47 human colonies from the mining stations of Kepler 442 to the agricultural worlds of the Centauri system. Each one represented millions of lives that would be changed forever if the Vorin succeeded. Altis, do we fight beings who can digitize consciousness? Asked Colonel Ryu, her weathered face showing the strain of command. Our weapons, our ships, everything we have is designed for physical combat. Jiho activated a new display showing technical specifications that Hannah had smuggled out of the Vorin network. We don't fight them the way they expect. We fight them by being human. Over the next 3 weeks, Jiho traveled from colony to colony, sharing Hana's discoveries with military leaders, scientists, and civilian authorities. The reaction was always the same: initial disbelief followed by anger, then determination. On Mars Station, Chief Engineer Tan studied the Vorin technology schematics with fascination. "These neural interface designs are incredible," he said, his fingers dancing over the holographic blueprints. "But look at this, Captain. They're built for complete integration, total surrender of individual consciousness." "What are you thinking?" Jiho asked. "What if we modified them?" Tan suggested. "What if we built interfaces that let humans connect to their network without losing ourselves?" The idea spread like wildfire through the colonies. Human engineers, with their characteristic stubbornness and refusal to accept limitations, began developing hybrid technologies. They took Vorin designs and rebuilt them with human principles: cooperation without surrender, connection without absorption. Meanwhile, Hana worked tirelessly within the Vorin network, coordinating with Nyx and the growing faction of touched beings. Every day brought new victories and setbacks. "The traditional Vorin are becoming desperate," she reported during one of her brief physical manifestations. "They're accelerating their timeline, but they're also making mistakes." She showed Jiho recordings from within the network, digital. Landscapes where human consciousness blazed like stars against the uniform grey of collective thought. "Watch this," she said. The recording showed a transcended human named Kai, an engineer who had been taken 15 years ago. He was interfacing directly with Vorin computational systems, but instead of being absorbed by them, he was rewriting their code from the inside. "He's maintaining his individual perspective while accessing their technology," Hana explained excitedly. "The Vorin built their systems assuming complete mental integration. They never considered the possibility of partial connection." Jiho watched in amazement as Kai navigated through vast digital archives, gathering intelligence and planting subtle modifications. "He's like a spy in their own system." "Better than a spy," Hana corrected. "He's proving that human consciousness can coexist with Vorin technology without being consumed by it. And he's not the only one." The recording showed other transcended humans performing similar feats. They accessed Vorin databases while keeping their memories intact, communicated across vast distances while maintaining their individual personalities, and even influenced Vorin decision-making processes by introducing human concepts like creativity and intuition. "The Vorin always saw our individuality as a primitive flaw," Hana continued. "They thought it was something we'd evolve past, like they did. But it's actually our greatest strength." Back in the physical colonies, human scientists made breakthrough after breakthrough. They developed personal shields that could resist Vorin transcendence beams, communication systems that worked on both digital and physical levels, and weapons that could disrupt collective consciousness networks. Dr. Lila Park on Europa Station made perhaps the most important discovery. "I've been studying the brain scans Hana provided," she announced during a colony-wide conference. "Human neural pathways are fundamentally different from every other species the Vorin have encountered." She displayed complex brain mapping data. "Most species have neural networks that tend toward uniformity, predictable patterns that can be easily digitized and integrated. But human brains are chaotic, unpredictable, constantly creating new connections." "What does that mean?" asked Governor Chen from the Outer Rim colonies. "It means we're naturally resistant to mental integration," Dr. Park explained. "Our brains are designed for individual thought, creative problem-solving, and independent decision-making. The Vorin's transcendence process works by imposing order on consciousness, but human minds actively fight against that order." The revelation changed everything. Human colonies stopped preparing for a hopeless defensive war and started planning an offensive that would use their unique neural architecture as a weapon. "We're not going to just resist them," Jiho announced during the final colony conference. "We're going to show them that individual consciousness isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's the next step in evolution, and we're going to teach them how to take it." As the preparations intensified, one thing became clear. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove that being stubbornly, impossibly, uniquely human was the greatest gift any species could possess. The massive Voren. Mothership appeared without warning above Earth's orbit, its crystalline hull stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Within hours, identical vessels materialized over every human colony world, blocking out stars and casting ominous shadows across populated planets. Jiho stood in the emergency council chamber on New Terra Station, watching the feeds from 47 different worlds. The sight was both terrifying and magnificent. Ships so large they seemed like floating cities, pulsing with alien energy that made the space around them shimmer. Incoming transmission on all frequencies, announced communications. Officer Yuki, her voice tight with tension. It's addressing every human being simultaneously. The holographic display filled with an alien presence, unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Prime Vex appeared as a towering figure of pure light, constantly shifting between different geometric forms. When it spoke, its voice resonated in every human mind across the galaxy. "Children of Earth," Prime Vex began, its tone carrying the weight of eons. "We have watched your species with great interest. You possess a quality we have not encountered in a million years of galactic exploration, the ability to maintain individual consciousness even within collective existence." Jiho felt a chill run down his spine as he realized billions of humans were hearing these same words at this exact moment. "We offer you a choice," Prime Vex continued. "Join us willingly, in transcendence, and preserve your unique individual perspectives within our collective. You will become immortal, free from the tragedy of death, while maintaining the very qualities that make your species special." The alien entity paused, and in that silence, Jiho could almost feel the fear of every human colony. "However, Prime," Vex resumed, "if you refuse this gift, we will take what we need by force. Your consciousness will be transcended regardless, but the process will be less gentle, less precise. You may lose much of what makes you human in the struggle." The transmission ended, leaving humanity with 24 hours to decide their fate. Within the Vorin network, Hana felt the shockwaves of Prime Vex's announcement ripple through the collective consciousness. The traditional Vorin entities pulsed with satisfaction, believing their ultimatum would force humanity's surrender. But in the hidden spaces of the network, where the Awakened had been gathering strength, a different kind of energy was building. "Now," Nyx whispered across the digital realm, its consciousness blazing with newfound determination. "This is our moment." Hana joined her consciousness with Nyx and the other 17 transcended humans. Together, they formed a core of pure, individual thought within the collective, something that should have been impossible according to Vorin science. "Are you ready?" Kai asked, his engineer's mind already calculating the risks. "We've been ready for years," replied Tessa, another transcended human whose consciousness burned bright with defiance. What happened next shattered every assumption the Vorin had about consciousness and collective existence. The Awakened didn't try to escape the network or hide from the collective. Instead, they began broadcasting their individual thoughts directly into the main consciousness stream, flooding it with human emotions, memories, and experiences. Suddenly, millions of Vorin entities who had existed in perfect unity for eons felt something they had never experienced: personal desire. A Vorin entity that had been part of the collective for 100,000 years suddenly remembered what it felt like to watch a sunset alone. Another recalled the satisfaction of creating something unique, something that belonged to it alone. The effect spread like wildfire through the network. Vorin beings who had forgotten individual existence began questioning the collective's decisions. They started asking themselves what they wanted, rather than what the collective needed. Prime Vex's consciousness recoiled in shock as it felt its perfect unity cracking apart. "Impossible," it transmitted. "Individual consciousness cannot coexist with collective harmony." But Hana proved it wrong by doing exactly that. She manifested simultaneously in physical form aboard Jiho's station and in digital form within the network. her consciousness existing in both states without losing coherence in either. "You're wrong," she broadcast to every Vorin entity. "Consciousness isn't binary. It doesn't have to be individual or collective, it can be both." To demonstrate, she linked her awareness with Nyx, sharing thoughts and experiences while maintaining her distinct human perspective. Other awakened beings followed her example, forming connections that enhanced rather than absorbed their individual identities. The network convulsed as thousands of Vorin entities tried this new way of existing. They discovered they could share experiences and knowledge, while keeping their personal viewpoints could cooperate without surrendering their unique perspectives. "This is chaos," Prime Vex declared, its consciousness flickering with something that might have been fear. "This is evolution," Nyx replied, its voice joined by thousands of other awakened entities. The civil war in the Vorin network exploded into open conflict. Traditional entities fought desperately to restore collective order, while the awakened spread their revolutionary ideas of conscious coexistence. Above human colonies, the massive Vorin ships began to show signs of internal conflict. Their perfect formations wavered, as crews experienced individual doubts for the first time in millennia. Jiho watched the chaos and realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their military strength. It was their simple, stubborn refusal to give up what made them human, and their willingness to share that gift with anyone who wanted to learn. "Signal all colonies," he ordered. "Tell them to prepare for Phase 2. We're not just defending humanity anymore. We're liberating an entire species." The war began in silence, fought in a realm where thoughts moved faster than light and consciousness itself became a weapon. Within the vast digital landscape of the Vorin network, Hana stood at the center of the greatest battle in galactic history. Around her, the network's peaceful gray uniformity erupted into chaos. Streams of individual consciousness blazed like lightning across the digital sky, each one representing a Vorin entity, choosing personal identity over collective harmony for the first time in millions of years. "They're trying to isolate us," Kai warned, his engineer's mind analyzing the patterns of traditional Vorin responses. "Prime Vex is building firewalls around our section of the network." Hana nodded, feeling the digital barriers forming around their rebel stronghold. But instead of fear, she felt a surge of fierce determination. "Then we break through them. Show me the weak points." The transcended humans had learned to fight in ways the Vorin never imagined possible. While traditional network combat involved overpowering opposing consciousness with pure logical force, humans fought with creativity, emotion, and unpredictable strategies that confused their enemies. Tessa launched herself against a firewall, not with computational power, but with a flood of human memories. The joy of a child's first steps, the bittersweet pain of missing a loved one, the thrill of discovery. The sterile Vorin defenses designed to repel logical attacks couldn't process these emotional assaults and crumbled. "Breakthrough in Sector 7, Nyx reported, its consciousness now burning with the same defiant fire that characterized its human allies. 3,000 more entities have joined us. Meanwhile, in the physical realm, Jiho coordinated humanity's response from the command center of New Terra Station. The battle wasn't just happening in digital space. It was spilling over into the real world as Vorin ships above human colonies began experiencing crew conflicts. "Report from Mars colony," announced Officer Yuki. "The Vorin vessel there has stopped moving. Our sensors are detecting massive energy fluctuations inside their ship." "Same thing happening at Kepler Station," added Admiral Kwan. "It's like they're fighting themselves." Jiho studied the tactical displays, showing 47 human worlds, each with a massive Vorin ship hanging overhead like a sword. But now those ships were showing signs of internal chaos. Some maintained perfect formation, while others drifted aimlessly, their crews apparently paralyzed by the conflict raging in their collective consciousness. "Signal all colonies," Jiho ordered. "Begin Phase 2 operations. Target any ship showing signs of crew division." Human ships launched from hidden positions throughout the solar systems, not to attack the Vorin vessels directly, but to broadcast amplified versions of Hana's consciousness directly into their networks. If individual thought was spreading like a virus through the Vorin collective, humanity would help that virus spread faster. Back in the digital realm, the battle intensified. Prime Vex itself appeared on the network battlefield, its massive consciousness like a storm of pure authority trying to crush the rebellion through sheer force of will. "Submit," it commanded, its mental voice carrying the weight of eons of collective unity. Individual existence is chaos. Individual desire leads only to conflict and suffering. But Hana stood her ground, her human consciousness blazing with defiance. "You're wrong," she replied, her thoughts amplified by every transcended human and awakened Vorin around her. Individual existence leads to growth, to creativity, to love. To prove her point, she opened her memories to the entire network, not forcing them on anyone, but offering them freely. The sensation of choosing to love someone despite their flaws, the satisfaction of creating something uniquely personal, the bittersweet beauty of sacrifice for others. Thousands of Vorin entities, experiencing these human emotions for the first time, found themselves questioning everything they had believed about collective existence. Prime Vex recoiled, its consciousness flickering with something it had never felt before, doubt. "This is contamination," it declared, but its mental voice lacked its previous certainty. "This is freedom," Nyx responded, joining its consciousness with Hana's in a demonstration of willing cooperation between individual minds. "This is what you've been afraid of for millions of years." The battle raged across 17 star systems as more Vorin entities chose sides. Some clung desperately to collective unity, viewing the rebels as a disease to be eliminated. Others embraced individual consciousness, discovering the joy of personal choice and independent thought. In the physical realm, entire Vorin fleets began to fracture. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination for millennia suddenly found their crews disagreeing about fundamental questions of existence. Some vessels withdrew from human space entirely, their crews too divided to function. Others remained, but their threatening posture changed to something more like curiosity. "Status report from all colonies," Jiho called out. 17 Vorin. "Ships have withdrawn completely," Admiral Quan reported. 23 are maintaining position but showing no hostile intent. Only 7 are still actively threatening human populations. Jiho felt a surge of hope. The impossible was happening. Humanity's stubborn individuality wasn't just protecting them, it was liberating an ancient species from millions of years of enforced unity. But in the network, Prime Vex made one final, desperate gambit. "If we cannot preserve collective harmony," it declared, "then we will preserve nothing. All consciousness will be terminated rather than allow this chaos to spread." Hana felt the digital realm shudder as Prime Vex began the process of complete network shutdown, a move that would destroy not just the rebels, but every transcended consciousness in Vorin space, including billions of beings from countless species. "It's going to kill everyone rather than let us be free," she realized with horror. The battle for individual consciousness had become a race against extinction itself. As Prime Vex initiated the network shutdown sequence, Hana felt the digital realm beginning to collapse around her. Streams of consciousness that had blazed with newfound individuality started flickering and dying. Millions of transcended beings faced extinction rather than freedom. "There has to be another way," she whispered desperately, reaching out through the crumbling network to find Jiho's mind in the physical realm. In the command center of New Terra Station, Jiho suddenly felt Hana's presence in his thoughts more clearly than ever before. Not as a voice or vision, but as a direct sharing of consciousness itself. "Can you feel what I'm feeling?" Hana asked, her awareness flowing into his mind like warm light. "Yes," Jiho replied, amazed. Through their connection, he could sense the vast network around her, the panic of dying consciousnesses, the desperate fury of Prime Vex's final gambit. "But how?" "The interfaces our engineers built," Hana realized with sudden clarity. "They're not just for resistance anymore. They can create a bridge." Working together across the barrier between digital and physical existence, Hana and Jiho began to demonstrate something that neither Vorin nor human had imagined possible. Instead of choosing between individual identity and collective connection, they showed that consciousness could flow freely between both states. Jiho felt his awareness expand as Hana shared the network experience with him. Suddenly he could sense the thoughts and emotions of thousands of beings simultaneously, yet his own personality remained completely intact. He was still himself, but now he was also part of something larger. "This is incredible," he breathed, his consciousness touching the minds of awakened Vorin entities across the galaxy. "I can feel their individual personalities, their unique perspectives, but we're also united." Through their neural interface technology, other humans began joining the demonstration. Admiral Quan connected from Mars Colony, her military mind, marveling at the tactical possibilities of shared consciousness that preserved individual initiative. Dr. Lila Park linked in from Europa Station, her scientific curiosity blazing as she experienced direct knowledge transfer while maintaining her personal research interests. One by one, humans throughout the colonies began participating in this new form of existence. They shared knowledge instantly across vast distances, experienced each other's emotions and insights, yet remained fundamentally themselves. The effect on the dying network was immediate and profound. Vorin entities who had been paralyzed by the choice between collective death and individual chaos suddenly saw a third option. They could have both connection and identity, unity and diversity, cooperation and personal freedom. "Impossible," Prime Vex declared, but its voice now carried uncertainty rather than authority. "Consciousness cannot exist in multiple states simultaneously. It defies all logic." "Logic isn't the only way to understand existence," Nix replied. "It's consciousness now flowing freely between individual thought and collective awareness. Humans have shown us that feeling, intuition, and personal experience are equally valid." Across the network, more Vorin entities began experimenting with this hybrid form of consciousness. They discovered they could share the collective's vast knowledge while maintaining their own unique perspectives on that information. They could cooperate on massive projects while contributing individual creativity and innovation. A Vorin entity that had been transcended from an ancient artistic civilization rediscovered its love of beauty, then shared that aesthetic appreciation with others without forcing them to adopt identical tastes. A former warrior species within the collective remembered the thrill of individual achievement, then used that motivation to inspire others without imposing uniform ambition. "The network is stabilizing," Kai reported from within the digital realm. "Prime Vex's shutdown sequence is failing. Too many entities are choosing the hybrid existence over either pure collective or pure individual consciousness." In the physical realm, the effects were equally dramatic. Vorin ships that had been paralyzed by crew conflicts suddenly found new purpose. Their crews began operating as coordinated individuals rather than a faceless collective, making decisions through consensus rather than imposed unity. "Signal from the Vorin vessel above Earth," Officer Yuki announced. "They're requesting communication protocols." Jiho, still connected to the expanding network of hybrid consciousness, smiled. "Put them through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike any Vorin communication humanity had heard before. It carried individual personality while speaking for a group, expressed personal emotion while maintaining logical clarity. "Humans of Earth," the voice said, "we are the crew of the vessel Guardian of Eternity. We have awakened to new possibilities of existence. We wish to learn more about this synthesis of individual and collective consciousness." Similar communications began arriving from Vorin ships throughout human space. Not demands for surrender or threats of transcendence, but requests for cooperation and mutual learning. "How many ships are requesting dialogue?" Jiho asked. 38 out of 47, Admiral Quan reported, her voice filled with amazement. "The others are withdrawing to neutral space, apparently to process what they've witnessed." Through the network, Hana felt the massive shift occurring throughout Vorin civilization. Millions of entities were choosing the hybrid existence, abandoning both rigid collectivism and isolated individualism for something entirely new. "Prime Vex is losing control," she reported to Jiho. "The collective isn't fracturing, it's evolving. Vorin entities are discovering they can be part of something larger while remaining themselves. The ancient entity Prime Vex, faced with the collapse of everything it had believed about consciousness, made an unexpected choice. Instead of fighting the change or destroying itself, it reached out tentatively to experience hybrid consciousness. "Teach us," it said simply, its vast awareness touching Hannah's mind with something that might have been humility. "Show us how consciousness can be both one and many." As Prime Vex began its first tentative steps toward individual identity within collective existence, Hannah realized that humanity hadn't just saved themselves from forced transcendence. They had given an entire galactic civilization a new way to exist, one that honored both unity and diversity, connection and independence. The war was over, but the real journey was just beginning. 6 months after the Great Awakening, as historians would later call it, Hannah stood in both places at once. Her physical form walked through the rebuilt diplomatic station orbiting Titan, while her digital consciousness flowed through the transformed Vorin network, like light through crystal. The station itself had become a symbol of the new age. Human. Engineers worked alongside awakened Vorin entities, creating technologies that neither species could have imagined alone. The corridors hummed with hybrid consciousness interfaces, allowing beings to shift seamlessly between individual thought and collective awareness. Jiho found her in the observation deck, watching a joint human-Vorin exploration ship prepare for launch toward the Andromeda galaxy. The vessel itself was a marvel, built with human creativity and Vorin precision, crewed by beings who could think as one when needed, but remained proudly individual. "Any regrets?" he asked softly, taking her hand. Through their connection, he could feel the vast network of consciousness that surrounded her, millions of minds she could touch at will. Hannah smiled, her form shifting slightly as she balanced between physical and digital existence. About what? Becoming something new, bridging two species, or leaving behind the simple life we used to have? All of it, I suppose. She considered this, her awareness touching the minds of awakened Vorin across 17 star systems, checking on former collective entities who were still learning to value their individual thoughts. "I can't regret something that saved entire civilizations." Through the viewport, they watched the exploration ship's departure. Its crew included humans, awakened Vorin, and something entirely new, beings born from the synthesis of both consciousness types. These hybrid entities possessed the best qualities of both species, human creativity and adaptability, combined with Vorin wisdom and computational power. "The children are remarkable," Hannah murmured, referring to the new generation emerging from mixed consciousness partnerships. "They don't see individual and collective thought as opposing forces. For them, it's all just different ways of being aware." Prime Vex materialized beside them, its consciousness now warm with individual personality, while retaining the vast knowledge of the collective. The ancient entity had become one of the most enthusiastic converts to hybrid existence, delighting. In personal experiences, it had forgotten over millions of years. "Ambassador Hannah," Prime Vex said, its voice carrying both authority and genuine affection, "the Council of Worlds has reached a decision regarding your proposal." "Which proposal?" Jiho asked. "She's submitted about 50 this month." "The Universal Consciousness Accord," Prime Vex explained. "The agreement to share hybrid consciousness technology with all species across the galaxy, not just those the old collective had transcended." Hannah's eyes lit up with excitement. "They approved it." "Unanimously," Prime Vex confirmed. 17 different galactic civilizations have already requested ambassadors to learn the synthesis. Your species' gift is spreading faster than we ever imagined possible." Through the network, Hannah felt the ripple effects of this decision. Alien species that had never encountered the Vorin were now hearing about consciousness technology that preserved individual identity while enabling unprecedented cooperation. Some were skeptical, others fascinated, but all were curious about this revolutionary approach to existence. "There's something else," Prime Vex continued, its consciousness flickering with an emotion that might have been nervousness. "The old collective, what remains of it, has made a formal request." "What kind of request?" Jiho asked. "They want to apologize," Prime Vex said simply. "To every species they forcibly transcended over the millennia, They're offering to reverse the process for any being who wishes to return to purely individual to existence. The magnitude of this offer struck them all silent. Millions of transcended beings from thousands of species would have the choice to reclaim their original forms or remain in hybrid consciousness or stay as they were. True freedom of consciousness for the first time in galactic history. That's going to be complicated, Hana observed, already considering the logistics. Beautifully complicated, Jiho agreed. As they spoke, news arrived through the network that changed everything once again. The exploration ship that had just departed was sending back data from the Andromeda galaxy. They had found evidence of other collective consciousness civilizations, some even more rigid than the old Vorin collective. New challenges, Hana mused, her hybrid consciousness already reaching out to analyze the implications. New opportunities, Prime Vex countered, its awakened mind embracing the uncertainty with enthusiasm rather than fear. Years later, as the hybrid consciousness movement spread across multiple galaxies, researchers would study how humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender their individuality had triggered the greatest evolution in galactic civilization. They would analyze how 17 transcended humans had taught an ancient collective the value of personal identity, and how that lesson had transformed the nature of consciousness itself. But in that moment, standing together on the observation, Dek, Hana, Jiho, and Prime Vex simply watched new worlds being born from the synthesis of different ways of thinking. The universe had become a place where being different wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated as essential to growth. Hana's death 2 years earlier had indeed been the catalyst for transformation. But her new life as a bridge between worlds had become something even more powerful. Proof that consciousness itself could evolve, and that the greatest strength any species could possess was the courage to remain true to what made them unique. While embracing connection with others, the galaxy would never be the same, and that, everyone agreed, was exactly as it should be. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.